The words still echo in my mind every time I walk into a boardroom. "You'll never be management material, Jennifer," said with such casual certainty, as if commenting on the weather. But sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the greatest gift of all, the burning desire to prove them wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I remember that morning like it was yesterday, though it's been almost 2 years now. The soft glow of my desk lamp illuminated the stack of financial projections I'd spent all weekend perfecting. 3 cups of coffee sat empty beside my keyboard, testament to the all-nighter I'd pulled to finish the Henderson proposal. I had been at Meridian Technologies for 7 years by then, working my way up from entry-level analyst to senior financial strategist, and this proposal was my chance to finally break through the invisible ceiling I'd been pushing against. The Henderson account wasn't just any account. It represented a potential $50 million partnership that would transform our mid-sized tech company into a serious player. For months, I had been quietly building relationships with their team, understanding their pain points, creating custom solutions no one else had thought to offer. I knew their business better than some of their own executives did. My desk phone rang at 8:17 a.m., just as I was adding the final touches to my presentation. "Jennifer Morgan," I answered, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued typing. "Jennifer, can you come to my office, now?" Richard Blackwell's voice was clipped, impatient. As CEO of Meridian, he rarely spoke directly to anyone below executive level, which made the call unusual enough for me to immediately save my work. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. I'll be right there." The walk to the executive floor always felt like crossing into another dimension. The standard gray carpet gave way to plush cream. The fluorescent lights softened to recessed lighting. The air even smelled different. Less coffee and printer toner, more expensive cologne and leather-bound portfolios. His assistant, Vanessa, didn't smile when I arrived. That should have been my first warning. The second was the presence of Marcus Holloway, our newly appointed COO, standing by the window in Blackwell's office, arms crossed, expression inscrutable. Marcus had been with the company barely 3 months, recruited from our largest competitor, with promises of carte blanche to modernize operations. In practice, this had mostly meant cutting corners and taking credit for other people's innovations. "Jennifer," Blackwell gestured vaguely toward a chair without looking up from his computer. "We need to discuss your role here." I sat, smoothing my skirt, mentally running through every project, every deadline, every interaction I'd had in the past week. Had I missed something? Had a client complained? "Is there a problem with the Henderson proposal?" I asked. "I was just finalizing." "The Henderson account has been reassigned," Marcus interrupted, turning from the window with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're taking a different approach." I felt my stomach drop. "Reassigned? I don't understand. I've been working with them for months. We have the presentation tomorrow. And Drew will handle it beautifully." Blackwell finally looked at me, leaning back in his leather chair. Drew Peterson was Marcus's former colleague, another new hire who'd spent more time networking in the executive lounge than actually learning our products. "Drew doesn't know the first thing about Henderson's integration needs," I said carefully, keeping my voice level. "Their CTO specifically requested our adaptive security framework, which I designed based on—" "Jennifer," Marcus cut in again, his voice honey smooth. "This isn't a debate. The decision's been made. We need you focusing on your core responsibilities." I took a measured breath. My core responsibilities include managing key accounts and developing strategic partnerships, which is exactly what I've been doing with Henderson. Blackwell exchanged a look with Marcus that made my skin prickle. It was the kind of look men like them had perfected. A silent communication that said, "Isn't she cute? Thinking she has a say in this?" "Actually," Blackwell said, sliding a folder across his desk, We're restructuring your role. Given the company's current trajectory, we need to streamline operations. You'll be transitioning to support Drew's team in a more analytical capacity. My hands remained perfectly still in my lap as I processed what he was really saying. They were demoting me, taking away the client relationships I'd built, the strategic work I'd excelled at, and pushing me back into a number-crunching role. 7 years of exceeding every target, bringing in millions in new business, mentoring junior staff, all erased with a single folder. May I ask why? I kept my voice neutral, professional. Marcus stepped forward, clearly enjoying his moment. It's nothing personal, Jennifer. We just need people with certain leadership qualities in client-facing positions. You're excellent with details, analysis, support work. Not everyone is cut out for the management track. There it was, not management material. The words hung in the air between us, not because I lacked skills or results, but because I didn't fit their image of leadership, which, coincidentally, looked exactly like them. I see, I said simply, though inside, something was crystallizing, not anger, not even disappointment, but a strange, cold clarity. And when does this transition take effect? Immediately, Blackwell replied, already turning back to his computer. Conversation clearly over in his mind. Drew needs the Henderson files on his desk by noon. Vanessa will email you the details of your new reporting structure. I nodded once, picked up the folder, and stood. 7 years of loyalty and excellence dismissed in a 5-minute conversation. No discussion, no recognition, not even the courtesy of advance notice. Is there anything else you need from me today? I asked, my voice steady. Marcus's smile widened slightly, mistaking my calm for surrender. Just the Henderson files. All of them. Drew has a vision for taking the account in a more dynamic direction. I nodded again and turned to leave. As I reached the door, Blackwell spoke again, almost as an afterthought. Oh, and Jennifer? The quarterly board presentation is next week. Make sure the financial projections are bulletproof. You know how Gordon gets about the numbers. Of course, I could be trusted with the tedious work of preparing board documents, just not with presenting them or making strategic decisions. I closed the door softly behind me, ignoring Vanessa's curious gaze as I walked past her desk. The elevator ride back to my floor was a blur. My mind was racing, not with panic or despair, but with rapid calculations. I'd spent months embedding myself so deeply in Henderson's business that I knew things their own executives had overlooked. Security vulnerabilities in their supply chain, integration gaps in their infrastructure, efficiency opportunities in their customer operations. I had built workarounds for these issues directly into my proposal, solutions so seamless they wouldn't even realize they were addressing critical weaknesses until they were already protected. Drew wouldn't even know what questions to ask, let alone have answers ready. He'd walk into tomorrow's meeting armed with generic slides and surface-level industry jargon. He'd promise whatever the client wanted to hear without understanding the technical complexities or implementation requirements. And when it all inevitably fell apart, who would they blame? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Not Drew. Never Drew. It would somehow become my failure for not supporting him adequately. Back at my desk, I opened my computer and simply sat for a moment, staring at the Henderson proposal I'd poured my heart into. The cold clarity I'd felt in Blackwell's office was solidifying into something else now: resolve. I had two choices. I could meekly hand over my work, accept my demotion, and watch Drew fumble through the biggest opportunity our company had seen in years. Or I could do something else entirely. People like Blackwell and Marcus had always underestimated women like me. They saw our thoroughness as lack of vision, our preparation as rigidity, our attention to relationships as softness. They never realized that the same qualities they dismissed made us dangerous opponents, because we saw details they overlooked, built contingencies they never considered, and understood people in ways they couldn't fathom. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. "Gordon Miller's office," a crisp voice answered. "This is Jennifer Morgan. I need 10 minutes with Mr. Miller today. It's urgent." There was a pause. Gordon Miller was the chairman of Meridian's board, not someone a senior financial strategist would typically call directly. But I had spent years preparing board materials, sitting quietly in the background of meetings, being the invisible person who made sure everything ran smoothly. I had Gordon's direct line because I was the one who organized the quarterly financial reviews he considered so important. To Blackwell, I was disposable. To Gordon, I was reliable. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Miller is in back-to-back meetings until 4 p.m. Please tell him it concerns the Henderson proposal and significant risks to the company's financial projections for next quarter. I wouldn't ask if it weren't critical." Another pause. "Hold, please." As I waited, I pulled up my personal email and forwarded myself key documents. Not the proposal itself, which was company property, but my meeting notes, relationship maps, and the integration analysis I'd created during those weekend hours. I was never compensated for. Information I had gathered through my own diligence, documented on my personal time. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Miller can see you at 4:15 p.m. in the North Conference Room." "Thank you. I appreciate it." I spent the next hours meticulously organizing the Henderson files. Every detail was perfectly labeled, every document thoughtfully arranged, and strategically incomplete. I wasn't sabotaging the proposal. Everything essential was there. But the connective insights, the deeper understanding of Henderson's business, the relationships I'd cultivated, those couldn't be transferred in a folder. Those lived in my head and in my personal notes. At 11:58 a.m., I delivered the files to Drew's office. He was on the phone, feet up on his desk, laughing about someone's golf game. He waved vaguely toward a corner of his desk without interrupting. His conversation. I placed the folder down carefully and left without a word. Next, I visited each of my team members individually. I didn't mention the demotion or vent my frustrations. Instead, I checked in on their projects, offered guidance, where needed, and thanked them for their hard work. Several seemed confused by my unusually solemn demeanor. "Is everything okay, Jen?" Priya asked, her eyes concerned. She was the brightest analyst on our team, someone I'd hired and mentored personally. "Everything's changing," I said carefully. "But change can be opportunity if you're prepared for it." She tilted her head, sensing the weight in my words. Should I be worried? I smiled reassuringly. "Not you. You're too valuable. Just keep doing excellent work and documenting everything carefully." At exactly 4:10 p.m., I gathered my materials and headed to the North Conference Room. I had prepared meticulously as I always did, but with a different purpose this time. My usual presentation folder was there, but so was a separate document, one that outlined exactly what would happen if Henderson walked away. Gordon Miller was already waiting when I arrived, checking his watch impatiently. At 67, he had the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades spotting financial inconsistencies and the demeanor of a man who didn't suffer fools. "Jennifer," he nodded briskly. "You said this was urgent. You have 7 minutes before my next call." "Thank you for making the time, Mr. Miller," I said, closing the door behind me. "I'll be direct. The Henderson account is in jeopardy, and with it, our entire Q3 and Q4 projections." His eyebrows raised slightly. Blackwell assured me it was a done deal. "It was," I said, sliding the first document across the table. "Until this morning, when he reassigned the account from me to Drew Peterson, who has no relationship with the client and limited understanding of their technical requirements." Gordon frowned, glancing at the paper, a projection of our quarterly earnings with and without the Henderson deal. The difference was stark. Why would Richard reassign a successful account manager weeks before closing? That's a question worth asking, I replied evenly, as is why our new COO would support a decision that puts a $50 million partnership at risk. Gordon studied me carefully. You're making serious implications, Ms. Morgan. I'm stating facts, Mr. Miller. Facts backed by data. I placed another document on the table, this one showing the pattern of account reassignments since Marcus had joined the company. 12 major accounts have been transferred from experienced managers to Marcus's new hires in the past 3 months. 3 have already taken their business elsewhere. 2 more are in review. Gordon picked up the paper, his frown deepening. Why haven't I seen this in the reports? Because the losses are being obscured by creative accounting and optimistic projections for new business that hasn't materialized, I said, sliding over a third document. The one I had spent most of the afternoon preparing. It cross-referenced our reported pipeline with actual client communications, showing the vast gap between what the board was being told and reality. Gordon was silent for a long moment, reviewing the numbers with the practiced eye of someone who had built his fortune on financial acumen. Finally, he looked up. Why are you bringing this to me instead of going through proper channels? Here was the moment of truth. I met his gaze directly. Because this morning, Mr. Blackwell informed me that I'm not management material and demoted me to an analytical role, effective immediately. The proper channels, as you put it, are the same people who have systematically dismantled the client relationships I've spent years building. I paused, measuring my next words carefully. I'm bringing this to you because I care about this company, Mr. Miller. I've dedicated 7 years to Meridian. I believe in what we built, and I'm watching it being hollowed out from the inside by short-term thinking and misplaced priorities. Gordon leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. For the first time, perhaps, he was seeing me not as the quiet woman who prepared his quarterly reports, but as someone with insights and convictions of her own. What exactly are you expecting from this conversation, Jennifer? Transparency, I replied simply. The board deserves to know the actual state of our client relationships and financial projections before making decisions based on manipulated numbers. Beyond that, I shrugged slightly. What happens next is your domain, not mine. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. Spoken like someone who understands management quite well, actually. He glanced at his watch. My next call is with the other board members, as it happens. I think I'll be sharing some of these insights. He gathered the documents I had provided and stood. I appreciate your directness, Ms. Morgan. Where can I reach you this evening if the board has questions? I handed him my card with my personal number written on the back. Anytime, Mr. Miller. As I walked back to my desk, I felt strangely calm. I had done something that would have been unthinkable to me just that morning, potentially burning bridges with the company I had dedicated my professional life to. Yet it felt right. Not vengeful, not emotional, but necessary. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make isn't slamming the door on the way out, but quietly showing others where the structural weaknesses lie. I packed my personal items into a small box, just a few photos, a plant, a spare pair of shoes, not because I expected to be fired tomorrow, but because regardless of what happened, I wouldn't be the same person who arrived at this desk this morning. That woman had believed in working within the system, in proving her worth through dedication and excellence. This woman, the one carefully wrapping her coffee mug in tissue paper, understood that some systems weren't designed to recognize certain kinds of excellence, no matter how proven. My phone buzzed as I was leaving, a text from Priya. Drew's freaking out, can't make sense of the Henderson files, keeps asking where you are. I smiled slightly but didn't respond. Let him flounder. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. I was halfway to my car when my phone rang, an unknown number. Jennifer Morgan, I answered, voice steady. Ms. Morgan, this is Elaine Winters, Mr. Miller's assistant. The board would like to see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Can you confirm your availability? My heart quickened slightly, but my voice remained calm. Yes, I'll be there. Excellent. The meeting will be in the main boardroom. Please come prepared to discuss the Henderson account in detail. I ended the call and sat in my car for a long moment, watching the sunset paint the Meridian Technologies building in shades of gold and amber. Whatever happened tomorrow would redefine my career, one way or another. But for the first time in years, I felt completely aligned with myself. No more shrinking, no more silent acceptance, no more being not management material. I started my car and pulled away from the building, leaving behind the woman I used to be. Tomorrow would bring consequences, certainly, but it would also bring clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the most valuable currency of all. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake replaying conversations, analyzing possible scenarios, preparing responses to questions that might never be asked. By 5 a.m., I gave up on rest and began my preparation in earnest. I chose my outfit with deliberate care. A charcoal gray suit, understated but impeccably tailored, with a deep blue blouse that brought out the intensity in my eyes. Professional, serious, confident, but not trying too hard. My appearance needed to reinforce my message. I was someone who knew her value, regardless of whether others recognized it. I arrived at Meridian at 7:30 a.m., early enough to center myself, but not so early as to appear anxious. The building was quiet, just a few early workers trickling in. I took the elevator directly to the top floor where the boardroom was located, a space I had arranged meetings in countless times but rarely spoken in. Elaine Winters was already there, efficiently arranging packets at each seat around the massive mahogany table. "Good morning, Ms. Morgan," she said, glancing up briefly. "The board will arrive at 8. Mr. Miller asked that you wait in the side office until called." The side office, a small room connected to the boardroom where presenters typically gathered before being summoned. It was both a courtesy and a reminder of hierarchy. Important enough to be near the conversation, not important enough to be present for all of it. "Of course," I replied, setting my portfolio on the table by the door. "Will Mr. Blackwell be attending?" Elaine's expression revealed nothing. "All executives have been asked to be available this morning." I nodded and made my way to the side office, closing the door softly behind me. Through the thin wall, I could hear the gradual arrival of the board members, murmured greetings, chairs pulling out, coffee being poured. I recognized Gordon Miller's distinctive baritone, Sheila Donovan's crisp British accent, James Chen's thoughtful, measured tones. At 8:05 a.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of Richard Blackwell's arrival, confident footsteps, booming voice, the immediate shift in energy that CEOs often commanded. Minutes later, Marcus's smooth, ingratiating tone joined the mix. At 8:17 a.m., the door to the side office opened. Elaine stood there, expression professional as always. "The board is ready for you now, Ms. Morgan." I gathered my materials and followed her into the boardroom. 7 board members sat around the table, with Richard Blackwell and Marcus Holloway at the far end. Blackwell looking irritated, Marcus uncharacteristically subdued. Drew was noticeably absent. Gordon Miller sat at the head of the table, his expression grave. "Thank you for joining us, Ms. Morgan. Please take a seat." I settled into the chair directly across from Blackwell, meeting his gaze briefly before turning my attention to Gordon. The room hummed with a tension I couldn't quite decipher. Something had clearly happened before I arrived. "Ms. Morgan," Gordon began, "yesterday you brought some concerning information to my attention regarding the Henderson account and our current financial projections. The board has spent the morning reviewing your analysis, along with additional data we requested overnight." He paused, glancing around the table. "We've also learned that the Henderson presentation scheduled for yesterday afternoon did not go well." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I wasn't surprised. Drew had been set up to fail, not by my withholding of information, but by his own unpreparedness and the executives who had placed him in a position he wasn't qualified for. "Before we continue," Gordon said, "I'd like to hear directly from you about the Henderson account, what it entails, why it matters to our company, and what you believe went wrong yesterday." I could feel Blackwell's eyes boring into me, but I kept my focus on Gordon and the other board members. "The Henderson Group represents a potential $50 million partnership over 3 years," I began, voice steady. "But more importantly, they're at the forefront of integrated supply chain security, an area where our technology has substantial competitive advantages, if properly applied." I opened my portfolio and distributed copies of a document I had prepared overnight. A single-page summary of Henderson's needs and our unique positioning to meet them. For the past 8 months, I've worked directly with their technical team to identify specific integration points where our security framework would address vulnerabilities they currently can't solve with existing vendors. These aren't generic solutions. They're customized approaches based on deep analysis of their infrastructure. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Yesterday's presentation failed because it tried to sell Henderson standardized products they don't need, while ignoring the custom integration work that would actually solve their problems. It demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of both their business and ours. Marcus shifted in his seat. "That's an oversimplification. Drew was presenting a more streamlined approach that would be easier to scale, at the expense of actually addressing their security requirements," I interrupted, surprising even myself with my directness. "Henderson doesn't need easy, they need effective. They need someone who understands that their third-party vendor access points create specific vulnerabilities that our adaptive framework was literally designed to address." The room fell silent. I had never spoken this way in front of the board before, with absolute confidence in my expertise, without hedging or minimizing my knowledge. James Chen, the board member with the most technical background, leaned forward. "Can you elaborate on these specific integration points?" For the next 15 minutes, I walked through the technical details of Henderson's infrastructure, the unique vulnerabilities I had identified, and the custom implementation I had designed. I used language that was precise without being condescending, technical without being obtuse. I spoke as someone who knew her subject matter completely. When I finished, James sat back, nodding slowly. "That's impressively thorough." Sheila Donovan tapped her pen against her notepad. "And this analysis, was it part of the materials transferred to Mr. Peterson for yesterday's presentation?" I met her gaze directly. The basic framework was included. The deeper insights, relationship context, and implementation specifications would have required direct communication and collaboration. Communication that didn't happen, Gordon stated rather than asked. "No," I confirmed. "I was informed of the account reassignment at 8:17 yesterday morning and instructed to transfer all files by noon. There was no transition discussion, no knowledge transfer meeting, no client introduction." Gordon turned to Blackwell. "Richard, you assured us yesterday that this transition was handled professionally and that Ms. Morgan had been properly consulted." Blackwell's face darkened. "The operational details of staff assignments are not typically board matters. We made a strategic decision to align client relationships with our forward-looking leadership structure. A structure that apparently doesn't include the person who built our most promising partnership opportunity," Sheila observed dryly. I remained silent, watching the dynamics shift. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about governance, about accountability, about the gap between what executives told the board and what was actually happening within the company. Gordon turned back to me. "Ms. Morgan, in your assessment, can the Henderson relationship be salvaged?" "Yes," I said without hesitation, "but not with generic solutions or surface-level understanding. They need to know we truly grasp their challenges and have the expertise to address them." "And you have this expertise?" James Chen asked. I do, I said simply. No false modesty, no qualification, just the truth. Gordon exchanged glances with the other board members, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Then he turned to Blackwell. Richard, the board would like to speak with you and Mr. Holloway privately. Ms. Morgan, would you please wait in the side office again? I nodded and gathered my materials, feeling Blackwell's glare as I exited the room. The door closed behind me, but the boardroom wasn't soundproofed, not completely. I could hear the rise and fall of voices, occasionally sharp, increasingly heated. Blackwell's voice rose several times, defensive, then angry. Gordon's remained level but firm. 23 minutes later, the door opened again. Elaine stood, there, her professional mask slightly cracked by what appeared to be surprise. The board would like you to return, Ms. Morgan. When I re-entered, Blackwell and Marcus were gone. The atmosphere had shifted, still serious, but with a different quality to the tension. Please, sit down, Gordon said, gesturing to the chair I had occupied earlier. As I settled in, he continued. Ms. Morgan, the board has made several decisions this morning that directly affect you, and we wanted to inform you personally. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart was racing. First, we've determined that the Henderson account will be returned to your management, effective immediately. James will accompany you to a meeting with their team tomorrow to assess whether the relationship can be repaired. James Chen nodded in confirmation, his expression suggesting he was actually looking forward to it. Second, Gordon continued, we've initiated a comprehensive review of all account reassignments made in the past 3 months, as well as the financial reporting practices that obscured their impact. He paused, glancing around the table before returning his gaze to me. And third, in light of significant concerns about current executive leadership, we are making temporary management changes while we conduct a more thorough evaluation. The room seemed to still. Whatever I had expected from this meeting, it wasn't this. Richard Blackwell has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Marcus Holloway's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. I maintained my composure, though internally I was reeling. I had hoped for a fair hearing, perhaps a reconsideration of my role. I hadn't expected a complete leadership shakeup. During this transition period, Gordon continued, we need someone with deep institutional knowledge, strong client relationships, and unquestionable integrity to help stabilize operations. His eyes held mine steadily. The board would like to appoint you as acting chief operating officer while we conduct our review. The position comes with full authority over day-to-day operations and client relationships. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Acting COO. The same title Marcus had held, the role I had been explicitly told I wasn't qualified for just yesterday. This would be a significant step up from your current responsibilities, Gordon acknowledged, but based on what we've seen, both. In your analysis and your presentation today, we believe you have the capabilities this company needs right now. I took a measured breath. May I ask what happens after your review is completed? Gordon's expression softened slightly. That depends partly on how operations run under your leadership. This is an opportunity, Ms. Morgan, to prove not just to us, but perhaps to yourself, exactly what you're capable of. I thought of Blackwell's dismissive words, not management material. I thought of all the meetings where my insights were overlooked, all the times I had been expected to do the work without receiving the recognition, all the moments I had swallowed my frustration and simply pushed forward anyway. And I thought of my team, Priya and the others who deserved better leadership than they'd been getting. I accept, I said, my voice quiet but firm. When would you like me to start? Gordon checked his watch. How does 9:30 sound? We'll need to make an announcement to the staff. I nodded, a small smile finally breaking through my professional facade. 9:30 works perfectly. As I left the boardroom, the weight of what had just happened began to settle on me. I wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy. The company was in turmoil, trust had been broken, relationships had been damaged. The road ahead would be challenging in ways I couldn't yet fully anticipate. But as I walked through the executive floor, the floor that would now include my office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The quiet certainty that comes from being exactly where you're meant to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do, not management material. The words still echoed, but now they sounded different. Not like a judgment, but like a challenge that had already been answered. I stepped into what would become my office and looked out at the morning sun illuminating the city below. Whatever came next, I was ready. Not because I had all the answers, but because I had something more valuable, the courage to speak truth to power, and the competence to back it up when given the chance. In that moment, standing at the threshold of a future I hadn't imagined possible 24 hours earlier, I made a silent promise to myself. I would be the leader I had always wished I had. And I would never let anyone tell me what I wasn't capable of again. The next morning arrived with a surreal quality. I stood in the elevator, watching the numbers climb to the executive floor, my floor now. The company-wide announcement had gone out at 10 a.m. the previous day. Jennifer Morgan appointed Acting Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. The email had been brief, clinical, offering no explanation for Blackwell's temporary leave of absence or Marcus's abrupt departure. The vacuum of information had predictably filled with rumors that spread through the office like wildfire. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since. Congratulatory messages from allies, suddenly friendly notes from people who had previously ignored me, and concerned texts from my team wondering what this meant for them. I had responded to each thoughtfully, but briefly. Today would be about actions, not words. The elevator doors opened to reveal Vanessa, Blackwell's former assistant, standing rigidly at her desk. Her expression was a careful blank, but the tension in her shoulders told me everything I needed to know about her uncertainty. "Good morning, Vanessa," I said, stopping at her desk rather than walking past as executives typically did. "Good morning, Ms. Morgan," she replied, her voice professionally neutral. "Your office is ready. Would you like coffee?" "Jennifer is fine," I said. "And yes to coffee, but first, do you have a moment to talk?" Surprise flickered across her face before she composed herself. "Of course." I gestured toward the empty office, Blackwell's office, now temporarily mine. "Shall we?" She followed me inside, perching cautiously on the edge of a chair as I closed the door and sat across from her rather than behind the imposing desk. "Vanessa, you've been with Meridian for how long now?" "Almost 11 years, she answered. I nodded. "Longer than me. Longer than Blackwell, even." "That's a wealth of institutional knowledge. You must have seen a lot of changes." She hesitated, clearly trying to gauge where I was going with this. "Yes." "I imagine the past 24 hours have been disorienting," I said directly. "I want to be clear about something. I value loyalty, but I value honesty more. I don't expect allegiance. To me personally, what I need is your commitment to what's best for Meridian and its people." Her posture relaxed marginally. "What exactly are you asking of me, Ms. Audi Jennifer?" "Two things. First, I need to understand what's actually happening in this company. Not the sanitized version presented in reports, but the reality. You see, things others don't. You hear conversations, observe patterns. That perspective is invaluable." She studied me for a long moment. "And the second thing? I need you to tell me when I'm wrong," I said simply. "Power has a way of insulating people from uncomfortable truths. I've watched it happen to others, and I don't intend to let it happen to me." For the first time, Vanessa's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise. That's unusual. So is this situation? I replied with a small smile. I didn't arrive here through the traditional path. I don't intend to lead through traditional methods either. A thoughtful expression crossed her face. Does this mean you want me to stay on as your assistant? I want you to consider a different role entirely, I said. Director of Executive Operations. You'd still manage the executive office, but with expanded responsibility and authority. The board has approved the position, pending your acceptance, of course. Her eyes widened slightly. That's a significant promotion. It's recognition of your actual value to this company, I corrected. Something long overdue, from what I can tell. Vanessa sat back in her chair, processing. After a moment, she straightened her shoulders and met my gaze directly. In the interest of the honesty you just requested, there are files you should see. Documents Mr. Blackwell kept separate from the official records. Now we were getting somewhere. Show me. For the next 2 hours, Vanessa walked me through a shadow system of reports and communications that painted a disturbing picture of Meridian's recent operations. Blackwell and Marcus had been systematically inflating performance metrics while cutting corners on product development. Worse, they had been using company resources to position themselves for a management buyout that would have left shareholders with devalued stock while they acquired control at a fraction of the company's true worth. Does the board know about this? I asked, scanning a particularly damning email exchange. I don't believe so, Vanessa replied. These communications were never shared during board reviews. I nodded slowly, organizing the documents into a coherent narrative. Make copies of everything. Secure them off-site, and I mean physically off-site, not in cloud storage that could be accessed or deleted remotely. We'll need to present this to the board, but carefully. There's more, Vanessa said, her voice dropping slightly. The Henderson account. There was a reason Mr. Blackwell reassigned it so abruptly. She pulled out another file, this one containing correspondence between Marcus and a venture capital firm with close ties to Henderson's main competitor. The implications were clear. Marcus had been laying groundwork to sabotage the Henderson deal, positioning himself for a lucrative role with the competitor after the inevitable fallout. And Drew? I asked, thinking of the hapless man who had been set up to fail. A pawn, Vanessa confirmed. Loyal to Marcus, but oblivious to the larger game. I closed the file, a cold clarity settling over me. This wasn't just about corporate politics or personal vendettas. This was systematic fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, the kind that typically ended with SEC investigations and criminal charges. Thank you, Vanessa. This couldn't have been easy for you. She met my gaze steadily. It should have been done sooner. But Mr. Blackwell, she hesitated, could be intimidating, I finished for her. I understand, but that era of leadership is over now. My next meeting was with the entire executive team, those who remained at least. 8 directors and vice presidents filed into the conference room at 11 a.m., their expressions ranging from openly curious to barely disguised hostility. Most had been with the company for years. A few were recent hires brought in by Marcus. All were watching me with the wary calculation of people trying to determine whether I represented threat or opportunity. I let them settle, deliberately, taking a seat in the middle of the table rather than at the head where Blackwell would have sat. Thank you all for adjusting your schedules, I began without preamble. I know the past 24 hours have raised more questions than answers. I'll be direct. Meridian is at a critical juncture. The board has identified serious concerns about our operational practices and financial reporting. My role is to stabilize the company while those concerns are addressed. Keith Warner, the VP of Sales and one of Marcus's closest allies, leaned forward with a tight smile. While we appreciate the board's Enthusiasm. For changes, some of us are wondering about the unusual nature of your appointment. No offense, Jennifer, but you've never held an executive position. The implied question hung in the air. What makes you qualified to lead us? I met his gaze calmly. That's a fair question, Keith. The simple answer is that I've spent 7 years learning every aspect of this business while others focused on titles and corner offices. I know our products, our clients, our challenges, and our opportunities in ways that transcend organizational charts. Before he could respond, I continued. But let me be even more direct. I'm not here to manage your careers or massage your egos. I'm here to save this company from the mess certain people have created. Those willing to be part of the solution will find me a supportive ally. Those who were part of the problem should start updating their resumes. A heavy silence fell over the room. Lisa Chen, our head of product development and someone I had always respected, broke it with a soft laugh. Well, that's refreshingly clear, she said. What exactly do you need from us, Jennifer? Transparency, I replied. Complete access to your department's operations, unfiltered assessment of our current situation, and your honest recommendations for immediate priorities. I laid out my expectations. Comprehensive departmental audits by the end of the week, daily progress reports, and most importantly, a culture of radical honesty. No more massaged numbers, no more hiding problems until they became crises. No more politics over productivity. One last thing, I said as the meeting concluded. The Henderson account is our top priority. Their team has agreed to meet tomorrow morning. Lisa, I'd like you there to address any technical questions. James Chen from the board will also attend. Keith's expression soured. Shouldn't sales be represented? Drew has been preparing. Drew will not be attending, I interrupted firmly. This relationship requires rebuilding trust, not sales tactics. If we demonstrate genuine understanding of their needs and technical competence to meet them, the sale will follow naturally. As the team filed out, Lisa lingered behind. Once we were alone, she sank back into her chair with an exhausted sigh. Thank God, she said simply. I raised an eyebrow. For what exactly? For someone finally cutting through the bullshit. She ran a hand through her short hair. Do you know how long I've been trying to raise alarms about our product roadmap? Marcus kept overriding my team's recommendations, pushing us to create flashy demos instead of addressing core functionality issues. When I pushed back, I was told to focus on execution, not strategy. I nodded, unsurprised. That ends today. I need your honest assessment of where we actually stand with product development, not the version in the official reports. Lisa's expression turned grim. It's not good. We're at least 2 development cycles behind where we should be. The security framework you designed for Henderson? It works, but we've neglected the underlying architecture while chasing shiny new features. For marketing to hype. How long to get it back on track? She considered. With proper resources and priorities, 3 months for essential stabilization, 6 to truly advance the platform. You'll have what you need, I promised. Draft a realistic plan. Budget, headcount, timeline. No padding, no wishful thinking. I want to present it to the board next week. After Lisa left, I stood at the window of the conference room, looking out at the city spread below. The magnitude of what I had taken on was starting to sink in. Meridian wasn't just dealing with leadership issues, it was facing existential threats created by the very people entrusted to protect it. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Rumors everywhere. Drew cleaning out his desk. Sales team freaking out. What's happening? I texted back. Town hall at 3 p.m. All will be explained. Trust the process. The town hall was a calculated risk. Traditionally, Meridian's leadership maintained careful distance from the rank and file, communicating through layers of management rather than directly. But these weren't traditional circumstances, and fear thrives in information vacuums. At Ernani. 3 p.m. sharp, I stood at the front of our largest conference space, facing nearly 200 employees. Some I knew well, others only by sight or name. All looked expectant, uncertain, hungry for clarity. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Rather than letting rumors define this moment, I wanted to speak with you directly about what's happening and what comes next." For the next 30 minutes, I gave them as much truth as I responsibly could, acknowledging the leadership changes, the financial challenges we faced, and most importantly, my commitment to transparency going forward. "I won't pretend to have all the answers," I said toward the end. "What I can promise is that decisions will be made based on what's best for Meridian's future, not individual agendas. Every person in this room matters to that future. Every role, every contribution, every idea has value." I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "For too long, many of you have worked without recognition, watched others take credit for your innovations, been told to stay in your lane when you identified problems that needed solving. That era is over." A tentative hand raised in the back. "Michael?" From the engineering team, someone known for asking difficult questions. "What about the rumors of financial irregularities?" he asked. "Are we in danger of layoffs, or worse?" The room tensed perceptibly. This was the fear lurking beneath. All the others, job security in uncertain times. "I won't sugarcoat this," I replied. "The board is conducting a thorough review of our financial practices under previous leadership. We will likely discover issues that require difficult decisions. But," I emphasized, "those decisions will be made with complete transparency and a commitment to preserving the incredible talent in this room." Another hand. Darla from customer support. "What about our customers? Are they being told what's happening?" "We're communicating with key clients personally, beginning with Henderson tomorrow. Others will receive appropriate updates as we have concrete information to share." The message is consistent. Meridian's products and services remain excellent, and our commitment to client success is stronger than ever. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Specific, practical concerns about projects, timelines, reporting structures. I answered each directly, without corporate doublespeak or empty reassurances. When I didn't know something, I said so plainly and committed to finding answers. As the town hall concluded, I noticed a subtle shift in the room's energy. Not jubilation, or even complete relief, but something equally valuable: cautious hope. They had been seen, heard, treated like adults capable of handling difficult truths. For many, it was a novel experience in corporate America. I returned to my temporary office to find Vanessa organizing a stack of reports on the desk. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected," I replied, sinking into a chair. "Though the real test will be what happens next. Any messages?" "Several," she said, handing me a neatly typed list. Most notably, Richard Blackwell's attorney called. "He's requesting a meeting tomorrow to discuss, and I quote, an amicable resolution to this temporary misunderstanding." I laughed softly. "Amicable, that's rich. Schedule him for 4 p.m. tomorrow, after the Henderson meeting." "Also," Vanessa continued, "Gordon Miller called personally. He'd like you to call him back as soon as possible." I nodded and picked up the phone once Vanessa had left. Gordon answered on the first ring. "Jennifer," he said without preamble. "How's day one as acting COO?" "Illuminating," I replied. "I've discovered some concerning documentation you should see. Financial manipulation that goes beyond what we initially suspected." There was a brief silence on the line. "How bad?" "Bad enough that we should involve outside counsel immediately. This isn't just corporate malfeasance. There are potential SEC violations." Gordon exhaled heavily. I was afraid of that. Blackwell's attorney has already reached out to several board members, floating the idea of a mutual separation agreement, with a generous severance package. Let me guess, with broad non-disclosure provisions and mutual releases of liability? Exactly. He's trying to buy his way out before the full extent of the damage is known. I considered this. What's the board's position? Divided, Gordon admitted. Some are concerned about public fallout, the impact on stock price, potential litigation costs. Others, myself included, believe complete transparency is the only sustainable path forward. I agree, I said firmly. Short-term pain for long-term health, but we need to move quickly. The longer this festers, the more opportunity for evidence to disappear and narratives to form. The Henderson meeting tomorrow, how are you feeling about it? Cautiously optimistic, I replied. They're willing to listen, which is more than we deserve after how they were treated. If we can demonstrate both technical competence and ethical leadership, I think the relationship is salvageable. Good, Gordon said. Because honestly, Jennifer, we need a win right now. Something to rally around, to show the board, the employees, and the market that Meridian is on a correction course. After ending the call, I reviewed the stack of reports Vanessa had prepared: departmental budgets, project timelines, client contracts. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Blackwell and Marcus hadn't just been playing fast and loose with numbers. They had created an elaborate shell game, shifting resources and manipulating reports to mask the company's true condition, while positioning themselves for personal gain. By 8 p.m., my eyes were burning from hours of spreadsheets and documentation. I gathered my things, preparing to leave for the first time in nearly 14 hours, when a soft knock came at the door. Priya stood there, looking uncertain. Sorry to bother you so late. I saw your light was still on. It's fine, I said, gesturing her in. What's up? She entered, fidgeting slightly with the tablet in her hands. I've been analyzing the financial data you requested, looking for discrepancies between reported client billings and actual services delivered. My interest sharpened. And? There's something weird in the system. She turned the tablet toward me, showing a complex spreadsheet. See these invoices? They're for strategic consulting services to companies I can't find any record of. Us actually working with. But they're being paid regularly into accounts that eventually filter back to us through a subsidiary. I studied the numbers, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. How much total? Just over $4 million in the past 18 months, she said quietly. All authorized by Marcus Holloway. This was beyond cooking the books. This was potentially money laundering or some other financial scheme I didn't yet understand. Have you shared this with anyone else? She shook her head. Only you. After what you said at the town hall about bringing concerns directly? I thought you should see it first. I nodded, immensely grateful for her trust. You did exactly right. I need you to secure this data immediately. Offline copies, detailed documentation of how you found it, timestamps, the works. Can you do that tonight? Already started, she said, a hint of pride in her voice. I've been documenting everything since I first noticed the pattern. I smiled, genuinely impressed. This is excellent work, Priya, truly. We'll need to bring in forensic accountants, probably law enforcement eventually, but your discovery may have just saved this company from much worse. After she left, I sat back in my chair, the weight of responsibility pressing down even heavier than before. This wasn't just about saving my job or proving my capabilities anymore. It was about protecting 200 employees, countless shareholders, and the integrity of a company I had helped build. The stakes had just risen dramatically, and with them, the potential for powerful people to fight back against my investigation. I sent a brief encrypted message to Gordon, requesting an emergency board call for 7 a.m. the following morning. Then I gathered my things and headed for the elevator, mind racing with contingency plans and next steps, The lobby was nearly empty at this hour, just the night security guard nodding as I passed. Outside, the spring evening was unexpectedly pleasant, a gentle breeze carrying the promise of warmer days ahead. I paused on the steps, breathing deeply, trying to center myself before the drive home. Working late, I see. I turned to find Drew Peterson leaning against a column, his typical smug expression replaced with something harder, more brittle. The scent of whiskey hung in the air between us. "Drew?" I acknowledged neutrally. "Yes, there's a lot to catch up on." He laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "I bet there is. Quite the coup you pulled off. One day you're nothing, the next you're running the show." I kept my expression impassive, though my senses had heightened to full alert. An intoxicated, angry man in a deserted area after dark, the situation counseled caution. "It's been a long day, Drew. I'm heading home." I moved to step past him, but he shifted, not quite blocking my path but making his presence unavoidable. "You think you've won," he said, voice low and venomous. "But you have no idea what you've stepped into. Marcus has friends in places you can't even imagine. This little power grab of yours isn't going to last." The implied threat hung in the air between us. I could have responded in kind, could have reminded him that his own position was precarious at best given his connection to Marcus. Instead, I simply met his gaze. "I understand you're upset, Drew. Change is difficult for everyone, but threatening a company officer isn't going to improve your situation." His eyes widened slightly, the realization that his words could have consequences penetrating his alcohol-fogged brain. "I didn't threaten anyone," he backpedaled quickly. "I'm just saying, things aren't as simple as they seem." "They rarely are," I agreed calmly, which is why it's best to approach complex situations with a clear head. "Good night, Drew." This time, when I moved past him, he didn't attempt to intercept me. But I could feel his eyes following me to my car, the weight of his resentment like a physical presence at my back. As I drove home through darkened streets, his words echoed uncomfortably. "Marcus has friends in places you can't even imagine." It was likely just the bravado of a displaced loyalist, but I couldn't entirely dismiss it. People with Marcus's ambition and apparent lack of ethics rarely operated in isolation. They cultivated networks, alliances, mutual protection societies. I had uncovered serious financial improprieties that could potentially lead to criminal charges. If Marcus had indeed been building a network of beneficiaries and co-conspirators, my investigation represented an existential threat to more than just his career. By the time I arrived home, a new resolve had hardened within me. I would not be intimidated, would not back down from what needed to be done. But neither would I be reckless or naive about the forces potentially arrayed against me. I sent a brief message to James Chen, the technically savvy board member who had seemed most aligned with my approach. Need to discuss cybersecurity protocols for sensitive investigation, potential external threats. Can you call tonight? His response came minutes later. Call secure line now. Use encryption key from last board document. 2 hours and several security protocols later, I finally collapsed into bed, mind still racing with all that had transpired and all that lay ahead. As I drifted toward sleep, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. I had spent years being underestimated, dismissed, told what I couldn't do and couldn't be. Now those same limitations were my greatest strength, because no one, not even Marcus with all his friends in high places, had any idea what I was truly capable of. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect spring day that belied the storm brewing within Meridian's walls. I arrived at the office by 6:30 a.m., giving myself time to review the materials Priya had prepared before the emergency board call. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Beyond the suspicious invoices, she had uncovered a pattern of financial transfers that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud. Money moved through a series of shell companies before returning to Meridian's books as recovered consulting fees or vendor rebates, artificially inflating revenue while masking the true source of funds. At precisely 7 a.m., I connected to the secure conference line. All 7 board members were present, along with the outside counsel Gordon had engaged overnight. Patricia Winters, a formidable attorney specializing in corporate governance and SEC matters. I presented the evidence methodically, without embellishment or accusation. The facts spoke eloquently enough without my commentary. When I finished, the silence stretched for several long moments. "This is significantly worse than we anticipated," Gordon finally said, his voice grave. Patricia spoke next, her tone measured but direct. "Based on what Ms. Morgan has presented, we're looking at potential securities fraud, wire fraud, and violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, among other concerns. The board has a fiduciary duty to act swiftly and decisively." "What exactly are you recommending?" asked Robert Wilson, one of the board members who had initially favored a quiet resolution with Blackwell. "Immediate notification to the SEC," Patricia replied without hesitation. "Full cooperation with any resulting investigation, separation of all involved parties without severance or benefits, and public disclosure to shareholders once we have a complete understanding of the scope." Robert's discomfort was palpable, even through the phone line. "The stock price will take a massive hit." "Yes," Patricia acknowledged, "in the short term. But the alternatives, allowing fraud to continue, or worse, being perceived as complicit in a cover-up, would be catastrophic in the long run." The discussion continued for another 40 minutes as the board grappled with their options and responsibilities. In the end, they voted unanimously to follow Patricia's recommendations, with one addition. My appointment as acting COO would be extended indefinitely, with expanded authority to implement necessary organizational changes. As the call concluded, Gordon asked me to stay on the line. "The Henderson meeting is at 10 a.m., correct?" he confirmed. "Yes," I replied. "Lisa Chen from Product Development will join me, along with James." "Good. I know this isn't ideal timing given everything else happening, but this relationship remains critical. If we can secure their business despite the current upheaval, it sends a powerful message about Meridian's fundamental strength." I agreed, though privately I wondered how I would focus on client relationship building, while simultaneously managing what was rapidly evolving into a corporate crisis of historic proportions. After the call, I found Vanessa already at her desk, her efficiency a steadying presence amid the chaos. "The legal team will arrive at 9 a.m., she informed me. "I've reserved the secure conference room and implemented the enhanced security protocols Mr. Chen recommended." I nodded gratefully. "Any word from Blackwell or his attorney?" "They've requested to move today's meeting earlier, to 1 p.m. instead of 4. I told them your schedule was committed until the original time." "Perfect. And the Henderson team?" "Confirmed for 10 a.m. "Conference room A has been prepared with the technical demonstration Lisa requested. James Chen arrived early and is reviewing the materials now." The morning accelerated into a blur of activity. The legal team, 6 stern-faced attorneys, and 2 forensic accountants arrived precisely at 9, establishing a command center in the secure conference room. I briefed them quickly before excusing myself to prepare for Henderson. At precisely 10 a.m., I walked into conference room A with Lisa Chen beside me. James Chen from the board was already seated, reviewing technical specifications on his tablet. Across the table sat 4 representatives from Henderson Group: Jonathan Reynolds, their CTO, Aisha Patel, Chief Security Officer, Marco Delgado, VP of Operations, and Eleanor West, their General Counsel. Their presence told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking this meeting. Jonathan's expression was professionally neutral, but the slight tension around his eyes betrayed his wariness. We had history, months of building. Trust that had been abruptly severed when Drew fumbled the presentation. The others I knew less well, though I had spoken with Aisha several times about the security framework. "Thank you all for coming," I began, deliberately skipping the small talk that typically opened such meetings. "I appreciate your willingness to reconsider our partnership, especially given recent events." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Recent events, being the complete leadership overhaul at Meridian that we learned about from industry news rather than from you directly? Fair point. I nodded, acknowledging the critique without defensiveness. "You're right. Communication has been inadequate. That ends today. You deserve complete transparency about what's happening at Meridian and how it affects our ability to deliver on commitments." For the next 15 minutes, I gave them a carefully calibrated overview of our situation, honest about the leadership changes and the ongoing review of operations, while emphasizing the board's commitment to ethical business practices and the strength of our core technical team. I didn't hide the challenges, but I also made clear that the issues stemmed from specific individuals, not systemic failures of our technology or overall company mission. When I finished, Marco leaned forward. "Appreciate the candor, Jennifer. But why should we hitch our wagon to a company in the midst of what sounds like a significant internal investigation? The risk seems unnecessary." It was the question I had been waiting for. Because despite the noise surrounding leadership changes, our core technology remains the most advanced and directly applicable solution to your specific security challenges. And because I personally guarantee that your implementation will be my highest priority, with direct oversight and accountability. I turned to Lisa. But don't take my word for it. Lisa can walk you through exactly how our adaptive framework addresses the third-party vendor vulnerabilities we identified in our earlier analysis. Lisa took over seamlessly, bringing up the technical demonstration she had prepared. For the next 40 minutes, she walked through a detailed explanation of how our security architecture would integrate with Henderson's existing systems, specifically addressing the weaknesses their previous security audits had identified, but never fully resolved. Throughout her presentation, I watched Aisha carefully. As CSO, she would be the most technically critical and the most aware of whether we were offering substance or merely polished marketing. Her expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued, and by the time Lisa concluded, she was leaning forward, fully engaged. "This is different from what we saw last week," Aisha said, glancing at me. "Drew's presentation focused on general security features, not our specific infrastructure vulnerabilities." "Drew didn't understand your needs," I said simply. "He was presenting a generic solution without the context necessary to customize it appropriately." Jonathan looked skeptical. "And you do understand our needs?" "I've spent 8 months learning your business from the inside out," I replied. "I know that your biggest concern isn't perimeter security. It's the sprawling network of third-party vendors with varying levels of access to your systems. I know that last year's breach came through a supposedly isolated HVAC monitoring system. That turned out to have a pathway to your core network. And I know that your board has mandated a comprehensive security overhaul before you can proceed with your expansion into European markets." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You've done your homework." "It's not homework when it's your job," I countered. "Understanding your business challenges is fundamental to creating solutions that actually work, not just checkboxes on an RFP." Eleanor, the general counsel, had been silently observing until now. "These leadership changes at Meridian," she said carefully, "how can we be confident they won't affect project delivery? We've been burned before by companies in transition." I appreciated her directness. "A fair concern. That's why I'm proposing 3 specific guarantees in our contract that go beyond standard terms." I slid a document across the table. First, implementation milestones with liquidated damages for delays. Second, a dedicated technical team that cannot be reassigned without your approval. And third, quarterly security audits by an independent third party of your choosing, at our expense. The room fell silent as they reviewed the document. These were unusually client-favorable terms, but I knew they were necessary to rebuild trust. "This is unexpected," Jonathan admitted. "Most vendors fight us on audit rights, let alone paying for them." "We're not most vendors," I replied. "And I'm not interested in just winning your business. I want to earn your trust. That starts with accountability." James Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke for the first time. "As a board member, I can confirm that these terms have full board approval. Meridian is committed to making this relationship a showcase for our capabilities, even as we navigate internal transitions." The meeting continued for another hour, diving deeper into technical specifications, implementation timelines, and contract terms. By the time we concluded, the shift in energy was palpable. What had begun as a courtesy meeting, likely scheduled to formally close the door on our partnership, had evolved into a substantive reconsideration. "We'll need to discuss this internally," Jonathan said as we wrapped up. "But I'd like to schedule a follow-up with our technical team next week to explore the implementation approach in more detail." It wasn't a commitment, but it was a significant step from where we'd been 24 hours earlier, written off as a failed opportunity. As we walked them out, Aisha held back slightly to speak with me privately. "That security framework," she said quietly. "The approach to layered validation protocols. That was your design, wasn't it?" I nodded, surprised by the question. "How did you know?" "Because it's elegant and practical rather than flashy and theoretical," she replied with a small smile. "It solves actual problems instead of looking impressive in demonstrations." "That's perceptive," she shrugged. "I've been in this industry long enough to recognize when someone actually understands security versus when they're just repeating buzzwords. For what it's worth, your framework is the first proposal I've seen that actually addresses our specific vulnerability pattern rather than throwing generic solutions at us." As they departed, Lisa turned to me with barely contained excitement. "That went better than I expected." "Much better," James agreed. The technical demonstration clearly impressed them, especially the security officer. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, but only a moment. "It's a step forward, but we need to maintain momentum." "Lisa, can you assemble the technical team that would handle implementation? I want them preparing detailed workflow diagrams and integration plans for the follow-up meeting." She nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. I already have a team in mind." As Lisa left to begin preparations, James touched my arm lightly. "Gordon asked me to update him immediately after the meeting. Mind if I use your office to call him?" "Go ahead. I need to check in with the legal team anyway." The secure conference room had been transformed into a command center, with laptops open, documents spread across tables, and serious conversations happening in every corner. Patricia Winters, the outside counsel, was standing by a whiteboard covered in flowcharts of financial transactions. "Jennifer," she greeted me. "Good timing. We're piecing together the full picture, and it's even more concerning than your initial findings suggested." She guided me to a chair and began walking through what they had uncovered. The suspicious invoices Priya had identified were just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath them lay a complex scheme involving not just financial misrepresentation, but potential market manipulation, conflicts of interest, and misappropriation of company resources. "Based on what we've found so far," Patricia said, her voice measured but grave, "Blackwell and Holloway appear to have been systematically positioning themselves to execute a hostile takeover of Meridian through a complex network of shell companies and private equity partners." "A hostile takeover of their own company?" I asked, trying to process the audacity of the scheme. "Essentially, yes. They were artificially depressing certain performance metrics while personally acquiring debt, instruments that would convert to significant equity in a restructuring scenario. Meanwhile, they were using company resources to develop a rescue plan that they would implement after taking control, a plan that would dramatically increase valuation once the artificially created problems were solved. The cynicism of the strategy was breathtaking. Create problems, position yourself as the solution, profit massively from the recovery you engineered, all while betraying shareholder trust and employee livelihoods. How close were they to executing this plan? I asked. Patricia's expression tightened. Uncomfortably close. The Henderson deal was apparently a key inflection point. Had it failed? Completely, it would have triggered a specific sequence of events, missed projections, debt covenant concerns, liquidity pressures, that would have created the perfect storm for their takeover narrative. I felt a cold clarity settling over me. So my removal from the Henderson account wasn't just about power or credit. It was strategically necessary for their larger scheme. Precisely. Your effectiveness was actually a liability to them. The better you performed, the more you threatened their timeline. For a moment, the irony was almost overwhelming. All those times I had been passed over, sidelined, told I wasn't management material. They hadn't been motivated by genuine doubts about my capabilities. They had been deliberate efforts to prevent me from disrupting a fraudulent scheme. What's our next step? I asked, pushing aside the personal implications to focus on the practical response. We've already initiated contact with the SEC Enforcement Division, Patricia replied. Their initial guidance is to continue gathering evidence while ensuring no further damage occurs. They'll be sending investigators tomorrow morning. She paused, studying me with professional assessment. You should be prepared. Once Blackwell realizes the extent of our investigation, which will become clear when he meets with you this afternoon, things are likely to escalate quickly. People facing securities fraud charges rarely go quietly. I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling more firmly on my shoulders. I understand. What do you need from me? Continue running the company, she said simply. Maintain stability, preserve client relationships, keep employees focused and productive. The strongest defense against market fallout is demonstrating that Meridian's core business remains sound despite the actions of specific bad actors. As I left the conference room, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Blackwell's attorney called again, insisting on moving the meeting earlier. Said it's in everyone's best interest to resolve this quickly. I texted back, maintain 4 p.m., no exceptions, and please ask security to be visible but unobtrusive near the conference room during the meeting. The request for earlier meetings, the increasing pressure. Blackwell was feeling the walls closing in. He wanted to secure his exit before the full extent of his actions came to light. What he didn't realize was that it was already too late. I spent the next 2 hours meeting with department heads, ensuring that daily operations continued smoothly despite the turmoil in the executive suite. Most were cautiously supportive, though a few, particularly those closest to Marcus, maintained a wary distance. I didn't push for false enthusiasm. Actions would speak louder than words in the days ahead. At 2:30 p.m., I returned to my office to find James waiting, his expression troubled. Henderson follow-up is scheduled for next Tuesday, he reported. They seemed genuinely impressed with the technical presentation. That's good news, I replied, though his demeanor suggested something else was on his mind. What else? He hesitated. I've been reviewing the communication logs between Blackwell, Marcus, and their outside partners. There's something you should see. He handed me his tablet, open to an email chain between Marcus and someone identified only as DG. Partner. The subject line read simply, Contingency Plan. As I read through the exchange, my blood ran cold. They had anticipated potential discovery of their scheme and had prepared accordingly. The contingency plan included detailed strategies for data destruction, alternative narratives to present to investigators, and most disturbingly, specific plans to discredit anyone who might expose them. My name appeared repeatedly, alongside phrases like documented performance issues, emotional instability, and history of making unfounded accusations. They had been building a file against me, manufacturing a record to undermine my credibility if I ever became a threat. "This is dated 3 months ago," I said quietly, noticing the timestamp. "Long before any of this came to light." James nodded grimly. "They've been watching you for some time. Your work on the Henderson account put you in a position to potentially disrupt their timeline. They were preparing to neutralize you if necessary." I set the tablet down, a strange calm settling over me. "They still are. And they'll move quickly once they realize how much we've uncovered." "The board is fully behind you," James assured me. "Gordon has already briefed everyone on what to expect." "It's not the board I'm worried about," I replied. "It's the broader damage they might do in their desperation to save themselves." At precisely 4 p.m., Richard Blackwell arrived for our meeting, accompanied by his attorney, a sleek, imperious woman named Catherine Baxter from a prestigious firm known for representing corporate executives in high-stakes disputes. I had arranged for the meeting to take place in a conference room rather than my office, with Patricia Winters joining us as Meridian's counsel. Blackwell looked immaculate as always, his bespoke suit and practiced smile betraying no hint of concern. But the tightness around his eyes told a different story. "Jennifer," he greeted me with forced cordiality. "I appreciate you making time in what must be a challenging transition period." I nodded without returning the smile. "Richard, Ms. Baxter, this is Patricia Winters, who's representing Meridian's interests in this matter." Catherine's expression flickered briefly. The presence of outside counsel, particularly someone of Patricia's caliber, had not been expected. Nevertheless, she recovered quickly, setting her briefcase on the table with practiced precision. "We're here to discuss an amicable resolution to what we believe is simply a misunderstanding between the board and Mr. Blackwell," she began smoothly. "We've prepared a separation agreement that addresses the board's concerns while recognizing Mr. Blackwell's significant contributions to Meridian over the years." She slid a thick document across the table. I didn't touch it. "Before we discuss any agreements," I said, "I think it's important to ensure we have a shared understanding of the current situation." Blackwell shifted slightly in his chair. "I believe the situation is clear. The board has chosen to move in a different direction, which is their prerogative. I'm simply looking to facilitate a smooth transition for all parties." "A smooth transition?" I repeated. "Is that what you call artificially manipulating company performance to position yourself for a leveraged buyout through shell companies?" The room went silent. Blackwell's practiced smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said carefully. Patricia opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. "Perhaps these will refresh your memory. Emails between you and Marcus Holloway discussing the restructuring opportunity. Odd wire transfers to Strategic Ventures LLC, which traces back to a holding company where you are the beneficial owner. Design specifications for a recovery strategy to be implemented after the anticipated share price drop." With each document she placed on the table, the color drained further from Blackwell's face. Catherine Baxter leaned in, whispering urgently, in his ear. "These are confidential company documents," Blackwell protested weakly, "taken out of context." "We have the full context," I interrupted, "including your contingency plans for discrediting anyone who might expose your scheme." Interesting reading. His eyes met mine, and for a moment the mask dropped completely. Behind the polished exterior was something ugly, a combination of rage, fear, and disbelief that someone like me had brought him to this point. "Whatever." "You think you found?" he said, voice suddenly cold. "It won't stand up to scrutiny. Do you really believe anyone will take your word over mine? You're nobody. A middle manager who got lucky. I smiled slightly. That's the thing about luck, Richard. It tends to favor the prepared. And I've been preparing for this moment longer than you realize. Catherine placed a restraining hand on Blackwell's arm. This conversation is over. My client will not be responding to unsubstantiated allegations without proper legal process. She turned to Patricia. Any further communication should come through my office. Patricia nodded coolly. That's fine, though you should know the SEC has been notified and will be on site tomorrow. I suggest you advise your client about the benefits of cooperation versus obstruction. Blackwell stood abruptly, his composure cracking further. This is absurd. A witch hunt orchestrated by a disgruntled employee who couldn't handle being passed over for promotion. The contempt in his voice was palpable, the same dismissive tone he had used when telling me I wasn't management material. It should have stung, should have triggered the familiar doubt that had shadowed me for years. Instead, I felt only a calm certainty. That's your story, I acknowledged. Here's mine. A qualified professional identified serious misconduct and had the courage to address it directly, despite knowing the powerful interests aligned against her. The evidence will determine which narrative prevails. As they prepared to leave, I added one final point. Richard, you should know that the board has authorized me to communicate directly with shareholders about the ongoing situation. We'll be issuing a preliminary statement tomorrow. The threat was clear. No quick, quiet exit with reputation intact. No generous severance package and glowing public statements about pursuing other opportunities. The truth would come out, with all its consequences. Blackwell's face hardened. You have no idea what you're doing. Actually, I replied, for the first time in a long time, I know exactly what I'm doing. After they departed, Patricia turned to me with a raised eyebrow. That went about as expected. Worse, I corrected. He's desperate now, and desperate people make dangerous choices. She nodded, understanding the implications. I'll coordinate with security to ensure all systems and facilities are monitored closely. And Jennifer, be careful. People like Blackwell aren't accustomed to losing, especially to someone they've underestimated. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and preparations for the SEC's arrival. By 7 p.m., I was finally alone in my office, reviewing the draft shareholder communication the legal team had prepared. The statement was deliberately measured, acknowledging the leadership changes and ongoing review of financial practices without making specific allegations that might complicate the investigation. As I made final edits, my phone rang. An unknown number. Jennifer Morgan, I answered. Ms. Morgan. The voice was unfamiliar, male, professionally neutral. My name is David Grant. I'm a reporter with the Financial Chronicle. I understand Meridian Technologies is undergoing some significant changes. My guard immediately went up. Meridian has announced leadership transitions. Yes. Any official statements would come through our communications department. I'm aware of the public announcements, he replied. I'm more interested in the allegations of financial irregularities and securities fraud that haven't been announced. My blood ran cold. Someone had leaked details of our investigation. Details that weren't yet public and could potentially interfere with the SEC's work if prematurely disclosed. I'm not sure what you're referring to, I said carefully. Sources close to the situation suggest that Richard Blackwell and Marcus Holloway were involved in a scheme to manipulate Meridian's performance for personal gain, he continued, undeterred. The same sources indicate you were instrumental in uncovering this activity, leading to your appointment as acting COO. Care to comment? I took a measured breath, mind racing. Denying the investigation would be pointless once the SEC arrived. Tomorrow. But confirming details prematurely could create legal complications and market volatility. Mr. Grant, Meridian takes its financial reporting obligations extremely seriously. We're conducting a thorough review of our practices to ensure complete accuracy and transparency. Beyond that, I can't comment on specifics until that review is complete. And your rather unusual promotion from senior strategist to COO? He pressed. That's quite a leap. There was something in his tone, a slight emphasis, a subtle implication that my appointment was somehow suspect. Meridian values leadership, capabilities wherever they appear in our organization, I replied evenly. The board made its decision based on demonstrated performance and organizational knowledge. He continued pushing for details, but I maintained the careful line between transparency and discretion. After several more attempts, he changed tactics. One last question, Ms. Morgan. Have you had any contact with Everest Partners in the IEI? Past 6 months? The question came from nowhere, completely unrelated to anything we had discussed. Everest Partners was a venture capital firm I had never had dealings with. No, I answered truthfully. I've had no contact with them. Interesting, he murmured. That's not what my sources indicate. They suggest you met with Everest's managing partner in February to discuss potential involvement in exactly the kind of leveraged buyout you're now accusing Blackwell of planning. And suddenly it all became clear. This wasn't a legitimate inquiry. It was the first stage of Blackwell's counterattack, planting false narratives, creating doubt about my motives, suggesting I was pursuing a personal vendetta rather than addressing genuine misconduct. Your sources are mistaken, I said firmly. I've never met with anyone from Everest Partners, and I have no interest in leveraged buyouts or financial engineering of any kind. What I care about is building honest, sustainable value for our clients, employees, and shareholders. So you categorically deny any contact with Everest? I categorically deny it, yes. And I'd suggest you carefully verify your sources before publishing allegations that are demonstrably false. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Patricia to alert her to the new development. She was unsurprised. It's a predictable tactic, she said. They're trying to muddy the waters, create competing narratives to confuse the issues. We anticipated this. In fact, she hesitated. What? We should consider the possibility that they've prepared more substantial, false evidence, fabricated emails, doctored photos, manipulated calendar entries. People who commit financial fraud rarely draw the line at document manipulation. The thought was unsettling but not entirely surprising. How do we counter that? We get ahead of it, she replied decisively. First thing tomorrow, we document your actual whereabouts during the timeframes in question. Gather electronic evidence of your location, independent verification from multiple sources. Make it impossible for false narratives to stand up to scrutiny. I agreed with her approach, but even as we made plans, I felt a growing unease. This was escalating quickly, becoming more personal and potentially more dangerous than I had anticipated. Blackwell wasn't just fighting to preserve his reputation or avoid legal consequences. He was fighting to destroy mine before I could destroy his. As I prepared to leave for the night, thoroughly exhausted by the day's events, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have taken the severance package when offered. Not too late to reconsider. No signature, no context needed. The message was clear. Back down or face the consequences. I stared at the text for a long moment, weighing my options. I could retreat, find a way to extricate myself from the growing storm. I could rationalize that my responsibility was limited, that others could carry the investigation forward without me. I could prioritize my personal safety and peace of mind over abstract principles of corporate governance and accountability. But that would mean becoming exactly what Blackwell had claimed I was, someone who lacked the courage and conviction to lead when it truly mattered, someone who wasn't management material. I deleted the text without responding and gathered my things. As I walked to the elevator, I caught my reflection in the glass wall of the conference room. Tired eyes, determined expression, standing straighter than I had in years. Whatever came next, I would face it directly. Not because I had something to prove to Blackwell or anyone else, but because I had finally stopped trying to prove myself at all. I knew my worth now, and that knowledge was more powerful than any threat they could make. The next morning began with a series of urgent text messages lighting up my phone before dawn. Patricia had sent an alert at 3:17 a.m. server access attempts. Detected from unauthorized devices. IT has locked down systems as precaution. SEC team arriving 8 a.m. I dressed quickly, opting for a structured navy suit that felt like armor for the battle ahead. The drive to Meridian felt different somehow. Streets I'd traveled thousands of times now charged with new significance. As I pulled into the parking garage at 6:30 a.m., I noticed an unfamiliar van with satellite equipment parked near the entrance. Press. News traveled fast in the tech world, and nothing attracted media attention like the scent of corporate scandal. Security had been enhanced overnight. Additional guards at entry points, ID checks for everyone, no exceptions. James Chen had implemented these measures after our conversation about potential threats, and I was grateful for his foresight. The guard at the executive elevator nodded respectfully as I approached. "Morning, Ms. Morgan. IT team asked me to let you know they're waiting in the secure conference room." I found 3 bleary-eyed IT specialists huddled around laptops, surrounded by empty coffee cups and technical printouts. Ravi Patel, our head of cybersecurity, looked up as I entered. "We've been here all night," he said without preamble. Multiple sophisticated intrusion attempts beginning around 2 a.m. Someone was trying to access server sections containing financial records and board communications. "Were they successful?" I asked, the implications already clear in my mind. "No," Ravi said with quiet pride. "We implemented the enhanced security protocols yesterday afternoon as James requested. Layered authentication, segregated access, real-time monitoring. They hit walls at every turn." "Any idea who they are?" He hesitated. "The attack signatures are professional, likely a contracted group rather than amateurs. But..." He turned his laptop toward me, displaying a technical trace analysis. "There's an interesting pattern. The attempts initially targeted your personal directories specifically, then expanded outward when those were inaccessible. My directories, not financial systems or executive files. Yours first, then others. Almost as if they were looking for something in particular associated with you. The implications weren't subtle. Someone was searching for compromising information, or possibly trying to plant false evidence that could be discovered later. Either way, it confirmed my suspicions about the escalation of Blackwell's counteroffensive." "Have you preserved all logs and evidence of the attempts?" I asked. "Complete forensic snapshots, time-stamped and secured," Ravi confirmed. "We anticipated the SEC might be interested." I nodded appreciatively. "Excellent work, all of you. Get some rest if you can. I'll need you sharp for what's coming." As they gathered their equipment, I added one more question. "Ravi, have there been any unusual access patterns to company systems in recent months? Specifically from Blackwell or Holloway accessing areas outside their normal patterns?" A knowing look crossed his face. "Funny you should ask. We noticed some anomalies about 3 months ago. Executive credentials being used to access HR files, performance reviews, email archives. At the time, we assumed it was related to restructuring plans. Can you pull a complete report of those access patterns? Focus on any instances involving my records or those of others now in leadership positions. I'll have it to you within the hour," he promised. By 7:30 a.m., the executive floor was humming with controlled tension. Vanessa had arrived early, organizing materials for the SEC meeting and coordinating with department heads about the day's adjusted priorities. The legal team occupied one conference room, IT security another, while Patricia Winters moved between them with focused efficiency. Morning briefing in 10 minutes, Vanessa informed me as I passed her desk. SEC team, legal counsel, and Gordon Miller on secure video. Has there been any media coverage yet? I asked. Financial Chronicle published an article online at 5 a.m., she replied, handing me a printout. Other outlets are picking it up, but mostly reporting that sources say without independent confirmation. I scanned the article quickly. As expected, it contained the false narrative about my supposed meetings with Everest Partners, framing the investigation as a potential power struggle rather than a legitimate response to misconduct. What surprised me was the careful wording, technically reporting what sources claimed without quite making direct accusations that could trigger libel concerns. We need to prepare a response, I said, something that acknowledges the leadership. Changes without confirming or denying specific allegations about the investigation. Vanessa nodded. Communications team is drafting options. They'll have something for your review by 9 a.m. The SEC team arrived precisely at 8 a.m. for Sirius. Professionals in conservative suits, led by a sharp-eyed woman named Eliza Hammond. They were escorted directly to the secure conference room where Patricia, Gordon, via video, and I waited to brief them on what we had uncovered. Thank you for responding so quickly, Patricia began once introductions were complete. As I mentioned, in our initial contact, we've identified concerning financial practices that appeared to constitute securities fraud, wire fraud, and potential violations of fiduciary duty. For the next hour, we walked the SEC team through the evidence we had gathered, the suspicious invoices, the shell company transactions, the deliberate manipulation of performance metrics, and most damningly, the documented planning of a scheme to artificially depress Meridian's value for personal gain. Eliza listened intently, occasionally asking precise technical questions that revealed her deep expertise in financial fraud investigations. When we finished our presentation, she nodded, thoughtfully. This is substantial, she acknowledged, particularly the documented intent. Too often in these cases, we see the pattern but struggle to prove the purpose behind it. Here, they've essentially created a roadmap of their planning. What are the next steps? Gordon asked from the video screen. We'll need to secure all relevant records, conduct interviews with key personnel, and establish a complete timeline of transactions, Eliza replied. We'll work closely with your legal team to ensure appropriate handling of evidence. Our priority is understanding the full scope of potential violations. She turned to me. Ms. Morgan, as acting COO and the person who initially identified these concerns, you'll be a central witness. We'll need detailed statements regarding how you discovered these irregularities and what actions you've taken in response. I nodded. Of course, whatever you need. I should also note, she added carefully, that we're aware of the article published this morning attempting to question your motivations. Such deflection tactics are common when individuals face serious allegations. We're interested in evidence, not narratives. Her statement was professionally neutral but carried a clear message. The SEC wasn't easily distracted by counterattacks and smear attempts. It was a small reassurance amid the growing storm. As the meeting concluded and the SEC team departed, with Patricia to establish their temporary headquarters within our building, Gordon asked me to remain for a private conversation. Jennifer, he said once we were alone, his image slightly pixelated on the secure video link. How are you holding up? The question caught me off guard. So focused had I been on the practical challenges that I hadn't really considered my own state. I'm fine. Focused on what needs to be done. He studied me through the screen. The board is extremely impressed with how you're handling this situation, particularly the Henderson meeting yesterday. Jonathan Reynolds called me, personally to say how much your direct involvement reassured them. That's good to hear, I replied, though there's still a long way to go before they fully commit. True. but the fact that they're still engaging at all is remarkable given the circumstances. He paused. We need to discuss succession planning. I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that premature? The investigation has barely begun. Not premature, prudent, he corrected. Whatever the outcome of the SEC investigation, Blackwell won't be returning as CEO. The board is unanimous on that point. We need to consider next steps for permanent leadership. Something in his tone made me suddenly attentive. What are you suggesting? The board believes you should be considered for the permanent CEO position, not just interim COO. For a moment, I was speechless. 2 days ago, I had been deemed unworthy of even basic management roles. Now they were discussing me as potential CEO. That's unexpected, I managed finally. Gordon's expression softened slightly. Is it? You've demonstrated exactly the qualities we need: integrity, deep knowledge of the business, strategic thinking, and the courage to take necessary action regardless of personal risk. Those aren't common traits, Jennifer. I appreciate the vote of confidence, I said carefully. But given everything happening right now, permanent leadership decisions should probably wait until we've stabilized the situation. Agreed. But I wanted you to know the direction of the board's thinking. Don't rule it out. After Gordon signed off, I sat for a moment absorbing the implications of our conversation. CEO. The possibility had never entered my thinking, not because I doubted my capabilities, but because I had internalized the artificial limitations others placed around me. How quickly those limitations dissolved when someone actually looked at results rather than conformity to a predetermined executive image. My contemplation was interrupted by Vanessa knocking softly at the door. Sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation developing that needs your attention. Drew Peterson has arrived with personal counsel and is demanding to speak with the SEC team. Demanding? On what grounds? He claims to have exculpatory evidence regarding the financial investigation, says he was manipulated by Marcus and wants to cooperate. Interesting development. Drew had been one of Marcus's most loyal allies, brought in specifically to execute his agenda. His sudden desire to cooperate suggested either genuine remorse or, more likely, an attempt to save himself now that the consequences were becoming clear. Where is he now? Security has him waiting in the lobby conference room. His attorney is with him. Let Patricia know immediately, then inform Drew that any communication with the SEC needs to go through proper channels. He's welcome to provide a formal statement, but there will be no unscheduled private meetings. Vanessa nodded and departed swiftly. I picked up my phone to text James. Drew Peterson has suddenly developed a conscience, requesting SEC meeting, likely looking for immunity deal. James replied almost immediately. Expected. Others will follow as pressure builds. Stay alert for fabricated narratives designed to minimize their roles while implicating you. He was right, of course. As the investigation intensified, those involved would inevitably turn on each other, seeking to redirect blame or position themselves as unwitting participants rather than active conspirators. Managing these shifting alliances would be crucial to maintaining a coherent investigation. I spent the next hour reviewing departmental reports and ensuring ongoing business operations remained on track despite the chaos at the executive level. The company still had clients to serve, products to develop, and employees who needed clear direction. Crisis couldn't become an excuse for dropping basic responsibilities. At 10:30 a.m., Patricia appeared at my door, her expression grave. We need to talk, she said, closing the door behind her. The SEC team has received a document package allegedly showing that you were directly involved in the financial manipulation you're now exposing. My stomach tightened, but I wasn't surprised. Fabricated evidence? Almost certainly, she confirmed. But sophisticated enough to require serious investigation. Emails appearing to be from your account. calendar entries showing meetings with the same shell companies Blackwell was using, a recorded conversation that's been heavily edited but includes your voice. Can the technical team verify these are forgeries? They're examining them now. The emails appear to have genuine metadata showing they came from your corporate account, though the actual content is inconsistent with your known writing patterns. The calendar entries are more concerning. They exist in archived system backups, which suggests they were planted months ago in preparation for exactly this scenario. The calculated nature of the attack was chilling. They hadn't just reacted to discovery. They had prepared for it methodically, creating an alternative narrative that could be deployed if their scheme was exposed. What about the recording? Patricia hesitated. It's you discussing financial restructuring options with someone whose voice is less clear. Specific phrases have been selected and arranged to suggest knowledge of the manipulation strategy. Our audio experts believe it's been spliced together from multiple legitimate conversations. Do we know the source of these materials? They were delivered anonymously to the SEC office early this morning, with a cover letter suggesting that the real fraud was your attempt to hijack control through false allegations against Blackwell and Holloway. I nodded slowly, processing the implications. They're trying to create enough doubt to derail the investigation, or at least divide the focus. Precisely. And while the SEC is sophisticated enough to approach anonymous evidence with appropriate skepticism, these materials are crafted well enough to necessitate thorough examination. What do? We cooperate fully while preparing our own evidentiary package demonstrating the fabrication, Patricia said firmly, starting with comprehensive documentation of your actual whereabouts during the alleged conspiracy meetings, technical analysis of the doctored emails and recordings, and witness statements regarding your consistent ethical conduct. As Patricia outlined our response strategy, my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Lisa Chen. Emergency with Henderson implementation plan. Need you ASAP in dev conference room. I excused myself and headed directly to the development area, where I found Lisa pacing anxiously, surrounded by concerned technical staff. What's happening? I asked. Someone deleted the entire Henderson technical specification repository, she said, voice tight with controlled anger. Every file, every document, every piece of code we've developed for their implementation. The backup triggered automatically, but it's been corrupted. When? Timestamps show approximately 4 a.m., around the same time as the broader intrusion attempts. Do we have offline copies? I asked, already suspecting the answer. We should, but the physical backup drives are missing from the secure storage. Someone with high-level access removed them sometime yesterday. The implications were obvious. This wasn't random vandalism, but targeted sabotage of the Henderson project specifically. Someone was trying to ensure that even if we retained the client relationship, we would be unable to deliver on our promises. Can we reconstruct the specifications? I asked. Lisa hesitated. Partially. Different team members have local copies of various components. But the complete integrated solution? That existed only in the repository and backups. I took a deep breath, centering myself amid the cascade of crises. All right. Gather everyone who worked on any aspect of the Henderson project. We're going to rebuild it from scratch if necessary. Pull all available documentation, client meeting notes, technical diagrams, anything that helps reconstruct our approach. That could take weeks, one of the developers protested. We don't have weeks, I replied. We have until the follow-up meeting on Tuesday. That's 4 days to recreate a solution we spent months developing. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to resignation. I understood their reaction. What I was asking seemed nearly impossible. But I also knew that the alternative was losing Henderson permanently, which would devastate not just our financial projections, but team morale and market confidence. I know this is an extraordinary ask, I acknowledged. but extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary responses. This isn't just about one client or one project. It's about demonstrating who we are as a company, people who deliver on promises no matter what obstacles arise. I turned to Lisa. We'll need a war room, round-the-clock staffing, whatever resources the team requires, and I'll be working alongside you. My technical background isn't current, but I understand the architecture better than most. For the first time, a flicker of hope crossed her face. You would do that? With everything else happening? Absolutely, I said, without hesitation. Henderson isn't just another client. They're the tangible proof that Meridian's foundation remains strong despite the actions of a few individuals. We need this win. For the next several hours, I worked directly with the development team, helping piece together the framework I had initially designed for Henderson's security implementation. The work was intense, detailed, requiring complete focus that provided a strange respite from the broader chaos engulfing the company. Here, in the realm of technical problems and solutions, outcomes depended on skill and effort rather than politics and perception. By late afternoon, we had reconstructed approximately 60% of the core specifications. A remarkable achievement given the circumstances, but still far short of what we needed for Tuesday's meeting. As we paused for a much-needed break, my phone lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. Jennifer Morgan, I answered. Ms. Morgan. The voice was vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. This is Jonathan Reynolds, from Henderson Group. My pulse quickened. Jonathan, what can I do for you? I received a strange call about an hour ago, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Someone claiming to be a concerned Meridian employee wanted to warn me that your company is in far deeper trouble than you've acknowledged, and that the security framework you presented won't actually be deliverable due to irreparable technical issues. The sabotage extended beyond destroying our work. They were actively undermining client relationships directly. Did this person identify themselves? No, but they seemed to have detailed knowledge of both our discussions and Meridian's internal situation. I took a measured breath. Jonathan, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. The truth is, we did experience a security breach last night that affected some development repositories, including aspects of your implementation plan. A calculated risk, acknowledging the technical issue while demonstrating transparency. The alternative was allowing anonymous sources to control the narrative. That doesn't inspire confidence, Jennifer, he replied, a note of concern evident in his voice. I understand, but there's more to the story. The breach appears to be directly connected to the leadership changes and financial investigation currently underway. We believe it was a deliberate attempt to sabotage key client relationships during a period of transition. A pause. So, someone is actively trying to undermine your ability to deliver on commitments to clients like us? Yes, which tells you how important those relationships must be if they're being specifically targeted. Another pause, longer this time. That's an interesting perspective. Jonathan, I won't pretend this situation is ideal, but I will promise you complete transparency. Our team is already reconstructing the affected materials. We will have a comprehensive implementation plan ready for Tuesday's meeting, as committed. And if you don't, then we'll acknowledge that directly and discuss appropriate next steps, including reasonable timeline adjustments or alternative approaches. What I won't do is make promises I can't keep or hide difficulties that affect your interests. The line went quiet for several seconds. Finally, Jonathan spoke again. I appreciate the honesty, Jennifer. It's refreshing, if somewhat concerning. For what it's worth, I believe you're acting in good faith. Thank you. That means a lot, especially now. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. The technical solution still needs to work, regardless of the internal drama at Meridian. Tuesday's meeting will be crucial. After ending the call, I returned to the development team with renewed determination. Jonathan's response suggested that transparency might actually strengthen rather than weaken client relationships, a validation of my approach to leadership in crisis. By 8 p.m., exhaustion was taking its toll on everyone. We had made significant progress but still faced substantial work over the weekend. I ordered dinner for the team and stepped out briefly to check in with Patricia about the SEC investigation status. I found her in the secure conference room, surrounded by documents and looking uncharacteristically troubled. "What's wrong?" I asked. "The fabricated evidence against you is more extensive than we initially realized," she replied. "They've created an elaborate digital trail suggesting you were not just aware of the financial manipulation, but actively participating in planning the leveraged buyout. Can we definitively prove it's fabricated?" "We're building that case, but it's complex. The forged materials use sophisticated techniques, metadata manipulation, system timestamp alterations, digital signatures that appear genuine on first examination. Our technical team is making progress identifying anomalies, but it takes time." I sank into a chair, the weight of the situation pressing down more heavily. They really prepared for every contingency. "They did," Patricia agreed, "which actually works in our favor in a way. This level of premeditation demonstrates consciousness of guilt. They anticipated discovery and created elaborate contingency plans. That's not the behavior of innocent executives." "What about the SEC? Are they giving equal weight to these fabricated materials?" "They're being appropriately cautious. Eliza Hammond has seen similar tactics before and understands that retaliation against whistleblowers often includes complex smear campaigns, but they still have to investigate all angles thoroughly." I nodded, understanding the delicate balance the investigators needed to maintain. "And Blackwell? Any further contact from him or his attorney?" "Multiple calls to board members, escalating offers for amicable resolution in exchange for limiting the scope of the investigation. So far, the board is holding firm, but the pressure is intense." "And the press?" "Growing. Financial Chronicle published a follow-up piece this afternoon quoting sources close to the investigation, challenging your credibility. 3 other publications have reached out for comment. The communications team is managing responses according to the approved statement, but interest is accelerating." I closed my eyes briefly, gathering my strength for what promised to be an even more challenging weekend ahead. We need to prepare for further escalation. Blackwell won't stop with digital sabotage and press manipulation. The more desperate he becomes, the more aggressive his tactics will be. Patricia studied me thoughtfully. "You're handling this remarkably well. Most people would be breaking under this kind of pressure." I offered a tired smile. "Perhaps being constantly underestimated has its advantages. When people don't believe you can lead, you develop strategies for influencing outcomes anyway. You learn to focus on substance over appearance, results over recognition." "Well, you're certainly getting recognition now," she observed. "Recognition I never sought," I replied. "What I wanted was simply the opportunity to contribute meaningfully, to have my work valued on its merits, rather than measured against arbitrary standards of what leadership should look like." I stood, gathering my notes. "And now I have that opportunity, albeit under extraordinary circumstances. The irony isn't lost on me." As I prepared to return to the development team, my phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. Unlike the previous anonymous message, this one contained no words, only an image. A photograph of my home, clearly taken earlier that day with my car in the driveway. A simple, chilling reminder that the battle had extended beyond corporate walls. I showed it to Patricia without comment. "This crosses a line," she said immediately. "We need to involve law enforcement." Agreed. But discreetly, the last thing we need is public speculation about threats and personal safety, adding another dimension to this situation. She nodded. I have contacts who can handle this appropriately. In the meantime, you shouldn't return home tonight. We'll arrange secure accommodation and additional security measures. As I walked back to the development team, the weight of the escalating situation settled more firmly on my shoulders. What had begun as professional vindication was evolving into something darker and potentially dangerous. Yet, despite the growing personal risk, I felt an unexpected clarity, a certainty about my path forward that had eluded me throughout years of trying to conform to others' expectations. The development team looked up expectantly as I returned. Despite their evident fatigue, they had continued making progress in my absence. Their commitment was a powerful reminder of why this fight mattered, not just for my personal vindication, but for everyone at Meridian who deserved ethical leadership and the opportunity to do meaningful work. "All right," I said, rejoining them at the central workstation. "Where are we with the encryption protocols for third-party access?" As we dove back into the technical challenge, I pushed thoughts of personal safety to the background. There would be time to address those concerns. For now, the most important thing was demonstrating that Meridian's value extended far beyond the corrupt leadership that had nearly destroyed it, and that some contributions couldn't be erased, no matter how determined the effort to undermine them. The next morning, I stood before the board of directors, my voice steady as I delivered the final evidence package proving Blackwell's fraud. The room fell silent as they reviewed documents we'd worked through the night to compile. Ironclad, proof that the supposed evidence against me had been fabricated. Gordon's expression shifted from concern to determination. "The SEC has cleared you completely," he announced, "and they've issued warrants for Blackwell and Holloway." 3 days later, Henderson signed the full contract. Our rebuilt security framework had impressed them even more than the original. "We're not just buying technology," Jonathan told me. "We're investing in leadership that delivers under impossible circumstances." When the board unanimously appointed me permanent CEO, I thought of that dismissive moment in Blackwell's office, not management material, how those words had fueled rather than diminished me. My first official act was promoting Priya to Director of Financial Strategy and Vanessa to VP of Operations, recognizing the talent that others had overlooked. "Leadership isn't about titles or corner offices," I told the assembled company at my first town hall. "It's about seeing potential where others see limitations, about building bridges where others create barriers, about standing firm when it would be easier to retreat." I smiled, feeling the weight of the journey that had brought me here. Sometimes the people who say you'll never make it are the ones who fear you most. Remember that. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.